It was a hot, dusty afternoon in the outskirts of Lagos when 11-year-old Amaka was told by her uncle to pack her things. Her small suitcase, faded pink with a broken zipper, held everything she owned: 2 dresses, a torn notebook, a photograph of her late parents, and a worn-out pair of sandals. Her uncle, Mr. Chuka, had raised her since the car accident took her mother and father 3 years earlier. At first he had seemed kind. He let her sleep on a mat in the corridor, gave her leftover gari and soup, and allowed her to attend the local school, though often late because of chores. But over time, kindness curdled into resentment. He began to call her a burden. When his new wife moved in, Amaka's presence became a problem to be solved. So, one morning without warning, Chuka told her she would be moving somewhere better. That better place turned out to be Hope Valley Orphanage, a crumbling yellow building with broken swings, overcrowded rooms, and an eerie silence that hung in the air like the smell of stale bread. Amaka didn't cry when they left her at the gate. She just held her photo tighter and looked up at the cracked sign as if hoping it might change. Life in the orphanage was harsh. The matron, Madame Blessing, had once been a nurse, but now she barked orders like a drill sergeant. There were 38 children and only 5 beds per room. Food was rationed. Some kids had given up on hope, others turned cruel to survive. But Amaka was different. She was quiet, observant, and possessed a kind of inner strength that even the matron couldn't crush. Every night, she would read from her parents' notebook, a tiny journal filled with advice, prayers, and old folk tales. It gave her strength. One evening, while cleaning the storage room as punishment for refusing to fight another girl, Amaka found a dusty box sealed with wax. Inside were dozens of letters, some addressed to the orphanage, others never opened. One envelope caught her eye. It was addressed to Mrs. Emanuela James, Lagos State Government Child Welfare Division, marked urgent, for immediate action. Curious and uneasy, Amaka slipped it under her clothes and read it in secret later that night. The letter was a complaint written 2 years earlier by a volunteer. It detailed serious neglect, hidden abuse, and the illegal siphoning of funds by the orphanage's administration. The document was never sent. It had been buried. Amaka knew this wasn't just an accident. Someone had deliberately hidden the letter. The very next day she began quietly gathering clues, listening near office doors, reading old files when no one was looking, and pretending to play when in fact she was mapping the entire orphanage's routines. She learned that food donations were stolen and sold. That some children had mysteriously disappeared after visits from strangers. She even found a locked drawer in Madame Blessing's office filled with children's ID cards. Something dark was happening in Hope Valley. But Amaka didn't panic. She planned. Carefully. Smartly. She started documenting everything with the help of another girl, Ngozi, who had once lived on the streets and was an expert at hiding things. They created a secret file under a loose floorboard in the laundry room, detailing names, dates, and incidents. Amaka's only hope was to get that evidence to someone who would care. And she had a plan. The orphanage had one old desktop computer connected to a printer and, miraculously, the internet. On a Sunday afternoon, while everyone was watching the TV in the common room, Amaka snuck in and typed a letter. She attached scanned documents, printed some, and then, just as Madame Blessing's heavy footsteps echoed down the hallway, she hit send to a public email address at nigerporters.ing with the subject line, "Please help us. We are not safe." 3 days passed after Amaka sent the letter, and with each passing hour, fear crept deeper into her bones. What if no one saw the email? What if Madame Blessing found out? But on the 4th day, as the children were served their usual watery porridge for lunch, something unusual happened. A black government SUV pulled up outside the orphanage gate. Behind it, 2 police vans rolled in, their lights flashing silently. The matron's smile dropped instantly. Within minutes, sharply dressed men and women stepped out, flashing badges from the Lagos State Child Welfare Department. Amaka's heart raced as one of them called out, "We're here for an emergency inspection." Panic set in. Madame Blessing tried to delay them, claiming the children were resting, that they had visitors, that the paperwork wasn't ready, but they didn't listen. They barged in, checking cupboards, medical records, and asking the children questions. Then they found the locked drawer in the office. When they forced it open, the room went silent. Dozens of identity cards and documents spilled onto the table. Proof of unregistered adoptions, missing records, and even fake death certificates for children who were never reported missing. Within hours, Madame Blessing and 2 other staff members were arrested. The orphanage was sealed off, and the children were taken to a temporary care center. The news exploded online. Local headlines screamed, "Undercover Orphanage Scandal in Lagos," exposed by child whistleblower. Bloggers, reporters, and even international outlets picked up the story. But the identity of the whistleblower remained anonymous, until a young intern from the welfare office spoke up. She had received Amaka's printed envelope when the teams arrived. Inside were the letters, handwritten reports, and one tiny note that read, "We are not afraid anymore." That single sentence went viral. Social media erupted with support. The governor ordered a full investigation, and more orphanages across the state were inspected. And Amaka? She was taken in for questioning, not as a suspect but as a hero. When asked how she'd gathered so much evidence, she quietly said, "Because someone had to." Her calm, intelligent responses caught the attention of a woman watching from behind the glass. Dr. Oluchi James, a human rights lawyer and former orphan herself, had never adopted a child. But that day she made a decision. She would fight for Amaka's guardianship. 2 weeks later, dressed in a neat yellow dress and shiny new shoes, Amaka stood before a judge beside Dr. James, who now called her "my daughter." The court ruled in her favor. Amaka was officially adopted. She moved to a quiet estate in Victoria Island, where she had her own bed, a full bookshelf, and 3 meals a day. But more than that, she had peace. Yet, Amaka never forgot where she came from. With Dr. James's help, she began speaking at youth events and human rights forums. She told her story with humility, never seeking pity. Just truth. The video of her first public speech went viral. A 12-year-old girl standing confidently before hundreds saying, "Being abandoned didn't break me. It taught me how to protect others who can't speak yet." Donations flooded in. Within a year, a new project was launched. The Amaka Initiative, a foundation dedicated to training child rights advocates and empowering orphan children with education and legal literacy. She became a symbol not just of survival but of transformation. Years later, Amaka would return to the spot where her uncle left her. The gate of the old orphanage was gone, replaced by a clean, modern children's center with a new name, the Amaka Home for Justice and Hope. She stood there in the sunlight, no longer the scared, silent girl with a broken suitcase, but a radiant young leader wearing confidence like armor. Her uncle, who had tried to disappear after the scandal broke, was later found and arrested for falsifying custody papers and fraud. Amaka didn't need revenge. She had something far more powerful, a story the world listened to, a life rebuilt from ashes, and the ability to protect others like the girl she once was. Because sometimes being thrown away doesn't end a story, it begins a revolution.